Welcome everyone to Trust 3.0's 2024 Digital Trust Crystal Ball, where along with 5 digital privacy experts, we discuss some of the most important themes and topics you need to know about in the coming 12 months. Let's kick off with introductions.
Hello, I'm Augustine Fou. I'm the founder of Fou Analytics. I've been studying the problem of ad fraud in digital marketing for the last 11 years. And I also consider myself a privacy advocate. So I'm sensitive to the topics surrounding collection of data and targeting in advertising. Thank you.
My name is Arielle Garcia. I recently founded a consultancy called ASG Solutions, where I'm focused on helping companies achieve sustainable growth through responsible marketing. Prior to that, I loudly resigned from my role as Chief Privacy Officer at a global media agency.
My name is Heidi Saas. I'm a data privacy and technology attorney. These are my opinions, not legal advice. I have 17 years of experience in consumer rights law. I expanded that into privacy 5 years ago, and 3 years ago, I moved into ethical AI because everybody knows we need more help there.
So, hello, my name is Francois Pelletier. I'm from Quebec City, and I'm, I would say, junior data scientist consultant, and I have a strong interest in free software, privacy, and everything that is around legal issues around data.
Hello, I'm Tara Taubman. Not sure if you can hear me. I represent Data Rainbow, and I've been into privacy and data protection for more than a decade since the GDPR came. My background is a French corporate lawyer, very enthusiastic about anything going on around AI.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Should I start with the questions? Are we all excited for the questions of the crystal ball? Notice that I have actually a crystal ball here. I hope it will tell us a lot of interesting truth and give us a lot of interesting information for this year to come. Start with the questions. Yes, everybody ready to go? Let's hear. Yay!
Hey.
Good. Thank you. I would say we should start in the order that we just designated. Is that okay for you, Greg? That order? Okay. The order which people introduce themselves in. So we would like to hear from you. What, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges for digital privacy in 2024? Let's start with Augustine.
You're mute.
Sorry. Okay. We all know that cookies are going away. And to be a little bit more precise about that, it's third-party cookies going away, right? So websites like New York Times, if you're just visiting the site, New York Times can still set a cookie so that you can remain logged in, for example. So those first-party cookies are still going to stay. But third-party cookies are used for ad targeting, right? So typically it's planted on a user's browser so that the ad tech companies can see which sites they visited, what search terms they typed in. So a lot of that is kind of privacy invasive because the consumers don't actually know what is being collected of them, and they really have no control over that. What I'm seeing is that even though cookies, third-party cookies are going away this year, the ad tech companies are finding workarounds. So they're going to be using even more invasive data collection practices, what we typically call fingerprints, right? So fingerprints are basically the collection of all the different JavaScript parameters that pertain to your browser. So combined with an IP address and the version of the browser, the screen resolution, the list of plugins, they can still relatively uniquely track the person. So this is not anything new, but in their desperation, when the easy to read third-party cookies go away, all the ad tech companies are simply going to replace it with fingerprinting techniques, right? And companies like Criteo have long since practiced that. So, pretty much the rest of the world is just catching up to those kind of even more invasive privacy issues, right? So more of the ad tech companies are going to do that.
And we'll have another question about that actually afterwards. So Arielle, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but maybe you want to talk about something else?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. that are a continuation of what we've seen in recent years, but are clearly already ramping up. And that would be sensitive data in the context of ad tech, as well as children's privacy. So both of these are issues where we've seen the FTC in the US already take some action this year. And what's at the core of that truly is their prioritization of vulnerable groups, right? We've seen some recent reports of ways that beyond like what we traditionally think of with privacy, the algorithmic recommendation engines on some social platforms were promoting and fostering really child sexual abuse strings. So these are pretty broad issues, whereas on the sensitive personal information issue, that's really a continuation of what we've really seen around the scrutiny of use of health data in advertising since the Dobbs decision in the US. And the last thing I'd call out is a broader theme that I see that is especially troubling in light of the progress that needs to be made around these areas, which is opacity creep from the platforms, right? As we have laws like Digital Services Act, as we see the FTC ramping up their action, we also see the platforms taking advantage of the AI momentum to push their black box products. And when they do that, it makes it incredibly difficult to envision how we can bridge the existing gaps when they're kind of forcing some of these exploitative or dangerous practices further underground under the guise of machine learning and algorithms.
Love it. Heidi, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this as well.
I do. I'm super excited about 2024. This is what I've been waiting for because in general, I think there are three ways to resolve a dispute. There's negotiation, litigation, and legislation. So far, we've tried negotiating with big tech and that hasn't worked. So we're at a standstill on legislation because Congress needs this data to keep their own jobs. So there's a conflict of interest. We're getting nowhere on legislation with that on the federal level. So we're getting state legislation instead, which is financed mostly by the tech industry because they're getting weak consumer protection versions of privacy law adopted. It's policy blocking good legislation. So, but they get to say they're doing something about privacy. Yay for them. They've enshrined privacy rights. Yeah, right? Yay for them. So also the money that they spent lobbying to accomplish this, you could have handled the food insecurity issues for the entire city of Detroit for 5 years. That's just with what was spent passing Virginia's privacy laws, just, you know, how dollars are spent. So I think we're at the point where litigation is going to be what is moving the shift of power back. It's never going to be all in the hands of the consumers, but right now it's all in the hands of the businesses collecting the data. So what the regulators are doing is they're putting forward legislation to claw back some of the parts where we have agency over our data. Those would be consumer rights laws because we don't have privacy laws for the most part on a federal level. So they're using consumer rights to claw back some of those protections. I think with what they're doing with limitations on targeted advertising using precise location data and sensitive location data, I think we're going to start to see the end of the real-time bidding process because you're not going to be able to track consent through all of that. You're also going to see mergers and acquisitions between data aggregators because they're going to have to strengthen the walled gardens and they're not all going to make it. So I think there's going to be a lot more transition in this area. Quite frankly, too many people work in marketing as it is. I think the whole industry is going to compress down to who is actually doing the work, and all the people that are selling magic are going to have to find something to do. I made a wand on the lathe. So if you've done everything else you can think of to convince people to do the right thing, wave the wand as a last resort.
I think we all need that kind of wand, honestly.
It's kind of cool.
Love it. It's wonderful. Who is next? Francois?
Yeah, my kind of challenge that I expect to pop up during this year are hidden LLMs. So the language models that we know as GPT, ChatGPT, and others are being embedded into product where we won't even be aware that they are there. And they will be used to collect way more personal data, confidential data from persons, from businesses, without us acknowledging it. And also what I've seen from especially the Microsoft Copilot product, is that the way they are splitting the responsibility between the employer and the employee on the use of LLMs inside the business context. So this is really something I think we will have to watch, because as there is more legislation on that side, they will try to escape it through various privacy policy stuff between the company and the employees.
Yes, I would agree. I'm a big proponent of transparency, because without transparency, there cannot be trust. And since we're all about trust, I think that this is a very interesting point. Thank you. Sarah?
There's still more to say. Unbelievable. Tracking, surely cookies are shifting with other ways of tracking. Algorithm is a big thing. I've been just today chatting about education and the use of AI. And one school in the UK that has appointed a AI chatbot headmaster. It's going to be interesting to follow. Of course, data broker. Heidi loves them. The whole industry behind that's one side that hasn't been enough tackled by the GDPR, but FTC has been more active on that. And yes, litigation. I've been following Article 82 GDPR on non-material damage civil compensation. I'm still waiting, and I can understand why nothing has been happening in that area yet. We see data breaches. We know that data breach sometimes just happen, but when the data controller is responsible and liable, there should be some kind of compensation. We haven't had that many enforcement. So at least civil litigation could bring something. And my hope is still towards the EU digital sovereignty. I'm still waiting for an EU cloud. Why don't we have an EU cloud? It's very important that we move on that way.
That is indeed. I can only applaud that. So the next topic will be the cookieless future that we have just mentioned. And I would like to hear first from Augustine, who and all of you have a lot to say on this. But let's again start with Augustine, because it's the order that Greg sees people on his screen. So this question is very simple: is the cookieless future good or bad for privacy?
I'm going to speak from the marketer's perspective. Even with third-party cookies, the data for targeting was so inaccurate that if we do away with the cookies, it's not going to get any better, right? And I'm speaking again mainly from the marketing perspective. So what they had used cookies for before was basically tracking what sites you went to or what search terms you searched on, and maybe even what locations you visited. And then they would try to derive some insights about who you were and what you liked. Because in most cases, the reason they have to do that on the open web is because users are not logged into most websites that they visit, right? Whereas on Facebook, on Google, you're always logged in for the entire day. So all of those targeting parameters are simply derived from observations of what websites you liked. So that used to work very well when it was very simple things, right? So if a person visited Victoria's Secret and a couple of other, women's fashion sites, you could probably safely assume that that was a female user, even if they didn't log in anywhere. And then vice versa, there are certain cases where you can assume it's a male user, and those would be still fine. But over the years, we now see, you visited Walmart or you visited Amazon. What can you derive about that, right? About the user, right? It's just too generic. Everyone goes there. So it just became a series of assumptions built on top of assumptions. Okay, so even with cookies, which identify the user or their browser, all the targeting was inferred from website visitation patterns and things like that. So it wasn't that accurate to begin with. And there have been not that many academic studies about it, but the ones that we have seen show that, even with one parameter like gender, the accuracy of the targeting was less than 50%. So it was no better than random. And then if you started to use two parameters like gender plus age, it was like down to 12%, right? 1 in 10 was even correct to begin with. So now doing away with cookies, all the ad tech companies have been just making this shit up anyway, right? It's like, why do anything different? People have not asked them hard questions or push back on that anyway. So now they're just going to continue making more BS up, and people won't know the difference. So the large agencies are going to still target. They're going to buy from Trade Desk, who has this UUID 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. It's the same BS. So until and unless the marketers actually look at their outcomes and see whether any of the digital marketing has driven business outcomes, some of these moves are great for Google, right? Because it's going to concentrate more of the spend on the logged in environments, right? The walled gardens. But all the other snake oil salesmen will continue to sell you just the next version of snake oil. So to me, it doesn't actually negatively impact privacy.
Okay, it's not a negative impact, yet we pay millions, or many companies pay millions for made up shit. I love that. Arielle,
I have literally nothing to add to that perspective. Like, that is exactly my perspective. So I'll talk about another piece of the same pie, right? So we're talking about these alternative identifiers. And I think that the way that they're being positioned is supposed to convince, I don't know, regulators, marketers, I'm not sure who, that somehow they're better for privacy. And yet I have yet to see one of these like identity frameworks that actually comes with standards for notice and choice that are any better than the Wild West iteration that existed during cookies. So fundamentally, like my answer to the question is it's exactly the same thing, right? Like there is net no change to privacy. Another thing I would add in this bucket is the other thing that it's doing is it's pushing more and more money towards retail media. And the challenge there is like, now we're going to have potentially more concentration of power in different areas, right? And one of the things that I'm watching closely from that perspective in terms of human impact is I don't really see anyone holding back on using certain sensitive transaction or purchase data to create audience segments. So again, it's like a new manifestation of the same exact problem.
Yes, I would 100% agree with you. Heidi.
Well, my friends at the FTC are on to them because they have technologists and data scientists, and they are going after data aggregators yesterday, as a matter of fact, for this very reason. They know what audiences are. They know what lookalikes are. They're as disgusted with them as I am. The language used in the decisions in the last 2 weeks regarding data brokers define location data, including mobile advertising identifier or identifier for advertisers. It's not restricted to just a MAID. So you can call it TID2, whatever you want to call it. It's doing the same thing. And so the behavior is going to be analyzed the same way. So I think that I use blockers, and there isn't as much data available about me as there would be other people. And I recently did an experiment on LinkedIn's data. They are not in my phone. And I use blockers. So they only had 538 data points they inferred about me based on my behavior on their site. And their accuracy was 88% wrong. Exactly, right? So I'm not so concerned about the cookies as I am about the inferencing. Inferencing means making shit up. It means snake oil. You should not invest money here because inferencing, they said that my skills include hip hop and hand-to-hand combat. And they also thought that I was a doctor. So all of these things, some may be true, but all of these things are not true. And that's the quality of data that they're using right now. So they're complaining about signal loss, but what you're going to get if you do things right would be better quality data. But instead, they're going to kick the can down the road and keep throwing a fit and complain to Google and drag it out a little bit more and see what they can do with the existing framework. And people just need to understand that you've been doing this for 20 years. These days are done. You've got to find something new to do, or you will not be here to hear me talk about how you suck next year. You will be working probably in cybersecurity or maybe in childcare, because we could use some help there too.
Love it. Yeah, again, made up shit. Love it. It seems to be a topic here. Francois, what do you think? Inferencing.
On LinkedIn, in the data, they consider me as an air conditioning expert. So, so this is the quality of data that LinkedIn has on me, especially since I post like there 3 times a day. I have thousands of posts on LinkedIn, and they still see me as air conditioning expert. On the cookie thing, I'm less aware of how it works behind the scenes. But what I saw is before we add maps.google.com, and now we go to google.com/maps. So that means they share the same cookies than the search engine. So this is something I noticed. I expect that the bit inside the large corporation like Google and Facebook and the other big tech, they will try to bring all their websites on their principal domain so they can share the first party cookie between their different entities this way. So this is something I saw, and it's kind of worrying because people use these services for different purposes. You don't use maps for the same reason you use YouTube or you use the search engine and the AI stuff that is coming. So I don't think this will be good for privacy on this side. So when you are inside the Google bubble, privacy will be worse because of that.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of it's not going to be better for privacy, in potentially even worse. So Tara, what is your opinion? The cookie.
Yes, lots of data aggregation, lots of assumption, and low accuracy. First assumption is that any electronic device would individually belong to one person. It has become the case more and more, but there are still people who share their devices. So sharing devices means sharing profile, but the profiling system doesn't care. It's one person. So that's one issue. Location data. I thought that people would talk more about it. I wrote an article 10 years ago, and it kind of went silent. There was a case of a German politician who was tracked by following location data, and as Francois mentioned, with something like a Google map, you can know a lot about the individual, his political activities, his religious belief, everything he does is revealed by a geolocation data. So what's the problem with tracking, profiling, and then inaccuracy, and the fact that it's assumed that it's individual device? It means a lot of wrong decision. That's a problem with algorithm. It's a huge problem with face recognition software that are used by police and crime. So you can be accused, and I hope it doesn't happen to anyone. It's a tough job to go and say, well, I wasn't there, it's not me, and I'm innocent. So these are a problem, wrong accusation. And my question is, do we really need profiling for trade and business? We've seen business and trade for centuries without profiling. Why do we need it? Do we need a YouTube or a Google to be so rich? I don't think so. I think we could have trade, we could have business, and still respecting people's privacy.
I think that should be possible too. Thank you for all of this. This is really amazing because, well, I think we come to the conclusion that the cookieless future will not build better digital trust, even though I have seen a lot of it will be so much better for your privacy. And I'm very glad to see that we are challenging this assumption here a little bit. I think we're going to our next question, Martin.
Yes, thank you. The next topic is going to be AI. So I'd like to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how concerned are you with the spread of AI? And what do you think we should be most concerned about, especially its societal, ethical impacts and impacts on digital privacy?
Well, I'll go first. Basically, AI is very concerning because, you know, we've all acknowledged in this forum that there's a lot of inaccurate data out there. AI is just now democratizing it so that the tools are available to even more people to make up even more BS. So even though there was a ton of BS before, now everyone can make even more BS. So it's not just the images, but when you look at the text, I ran my own experiments. We used ChatGPT, we built our own LLMs. Even when I fed it all my own articles, I gave it 500 of my own articles. The stuff that came out was barely readable, right? So the LLMs can form English sentences, but the content and the meaning is so inaccurate and so bad. So there are certain applications of it that are totally fine, right? For marketing purposes, right? There's no correct answer for marketing. You just need some flowery BS to sell the coffee or to sell the chocolate or something. So there's certain cases where AI will be helpful because it saves the time, right? It'll make up the BS faster than the human can. But there's other dangers of that, which are, we've already seen this where the deep fakes, they have Obama saying something he never said, right? We have Trump saying something he never said. So those are actually going to be used. We've already seen it since the 2016 election. And this year is another election cycle in the US. So we're going to see the proliferation of incorrect information, deliberately falsified using AI, right? The voices sound real. The images, the talking heads sound real. So it's going to be very difficult. It was already difficult for consumers to tell apart what is real news versus fake news. And now it's going to be virtually impossible because it's like, oh, it's videographic evidence. No one's going to do the work and look up whether that actually occurred or not. Right. So I think there's going to be significant societal harm that will come because of the proliferation of the use of AI or the democratization of the tools.
Thank you. Arielle?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think, I alluded to a little bit of this before, but I'll speak again from the advertising industry dynamics that I'm seeing. So first of all, I think that the acceleration of AI is positioning the platforms to sustain their and really expand their monopolies. But the other problem is that they're using it to condition marketers to relinquish even more control and to accept even less transparency over where their ads run. Now, the knock-on effects are that they are further putting publishers in a chokehold. There is further damage occurring to the funding of quality journalism. And meanwhile, we will have the rise in information that's not credible and not accurate in an election year. So I think the interesting thing to me is how all of these things are really interconnected. And I too worry about democracy. I worry about civic integrity. I worry about truth and how that's sustained. And in particular, in the near term, I really, really wonder about the future of journalism.
I agree with that 100%. So when it comes to AI, I believe my biggest issues are going to be fraud and discrimination. And in discrimination, if you've been accused of aiding genocide, I really desperately think you're going to have problems with discrimination in your tools too. Also, if you've been previously found committing fraud on the public before you implemented generative AI into all of your tools, I think you have to pause and clear the air to let us know that you are trustworthy before you start implementing the ultimate bullshit maker into everything that you do, because we didn't believe you were telling the truth before. We know that there are lies coming out now. How are we ever going to get back through to find what the truth is? So using complexity as cover and creating this moat is just going to enrich the first standers that are in the community who have already invested in building AI. I think that we need a public testing space, like a sandbox for these types of things. Technology used to ask for permission first before they deployed something, and they were horribly embarrassed if it went wrong, and that's gone out the window. I don't know where their shame went, but I'd like to bring that back. So in AI, my biggest problems, because of the quality of the data going in, I know that you're going to have discriminatory results coming out. So even after we improve the quality of the data, we're still going to have to go back and audit the tools to make sure that you're getting fair and just outcomes.
Exactly. Francois?
One thing that worries me a lot about AI, and I would put it on level 6, is the use in healthcare. Because we have a lack of specialists, especially in mental health. And people who are in a bad situation mentally will tend to use this kind of tools to reassure themselves that they are not going that bad. And these tools are not doctors, they are not psychologists, they cannot diagnose anything, they are just spitting words. So the danger there is that people will tend to believe what comes out from these tools that were trained on websites where people could put like almost anything. Like there's WebMD, that is something, but in the French world there's something called Doctissimo, and Doctissimo is like there's nothing credible on that website, and it's huge in terms of content. And if this kind of tools are used to train LLMs for medical advice, this could be a catastrophe. So this is what worries me the most.
Again, not very trustworthy. Tara?
Well, I would have maybe a different sound. I don't dislike AI. I love technology. What I don't like is technology abusing my privacy and technology being inaccurate. I think within the AI, we will have to somehow make a better definition. I don't think ChatGPT is AI. LLMs aren't the same AI as the one that the medical technology can use or other technology have been using as what I would call real AI, artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is a language model. I think it's been an abuse of language calling it AI. It's no way an AI. It's done to rewrite what you can write. As a non-native English, for me, it's great. I have to refrain myself from using it simply because the downside is the environmental impact. So I care about the environment. I have children and I don't want them to be lacking water. I don't want them to have a planet where things are restricted because we've been only using ChatGPT thinking it's an AI. ChatGPT, I repeat, is not AI. For what it brings, it doesn't worth the cost. But there are AI that are absolutely great. I was on holiday and with a friend who were driving a Tesla. I first feel a bit guilty because I've been criticizing so much a Tesla that I'm now sitting in a Tesla. It has great features. The problem is it's not reliable. And the other problem is that a lot of these so-called AI are have the Theranos effect. They promise more than what they do. So when the ChatGPT bubble would burst, I'm waiting for it. I think it will happen. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, a lot of time and energy and resources spent to go and some of the lawyers are so enthusiastic with ChatGPT, but the level of BS doesn't worth it because you have to proofread everything, you have to check everything. And because it's well written, it all looks very nice. So it's quite tempting to just copy and paste, but you can't. So yeah, AI, I love it. ChatGPT, I really don't like it.
Technology is not a magical solution to create trust also. So I think we have made some very interesting predictions. All of this is in our crystal ball. We'll come back to probably have another event like this very soon. Francois, did you want to give us some, like the last word of the geek a little bit? So just some tips and tricks that you have, I would say like two minutes maybe.
Yeah. I've noted 2 ideas. The first one was about cookies, and we talked a lot about cookies, so I think it's quite covered. I called it homemade cookies, which is the opposite of what I said, is to build different subdomains for different part of your business. So your buyers have cookies and your regular visitors don't. And the other thing is something that was announced by Intel. They are bringing AI processors on motherboards for personal computers. So we will be able to use those fancy tools that we call LLMs locally on our machines, because in the clouds, everything leaks. And even GPUs have leaks. So I'm really looking forward to be able to use more of these toys, because I think LLMs are toys on our machines for fun, for gaming, for family purpose, and not for medical advice or things like that.
That is.
So
May I add one little point?
Yeah.
Public thank you to Augustine Fou for his tracking tool. It's absolutely great. If people don't know about it, they should try it.
Yay.
I just want to add one
What
more
a plug.
I love
Thank you, Tara. Thank
as
you.
well. Yeah, awesome. One more thing about the LLMs that I think we need to recognize is that these are designed on white English. And so if you are not proficient in speaking white English, you are not going to get the same results. So, I mean, that's kind of a weird problem, Western, educated, industrialized. I mean, and we don't see outside of that bubble too often because we're used to doing everything professionally in English for the most part, right? So I think that's kind of an exceptionalism. We need to take the blinders off.
yeah, I speak Canadian French, Quebec French, and it's really different from France French or African French. So I see that it's not able to speak Quebec language. When it does, it's really like caricatural. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Important point. Yeah. It's not tech is not going to save us, but this is the tech way, and not really building more trust.
Thank you all for being part of this amazing virtual roundtable. And if you want to reach out to any of the guest speakers that you saw today, their details will be in the description, and I'm sure you can catch up with them on the likes of LinkedIn. So thank you all very much for joining.